You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 243, part 2 of the Asajj Ventress character dissection. We're going to take a look back at her time after helping to exonerate Ahsoka Tano, primarily in the novel Dark Disciple. But before we do, please welcome to the show the co-host of the Cantina Cast and the only person I know that was not listed as a cast member in episode 9, Jonesy. Jonesy, how are you doing tonight?
I am a veteran of stuff, Star Wars-ish related.
Really? What kind of
Is
stuff?
that sufficient? Can I get my name on the credits, please, JJ?
Yeah, I guess that would probably work. There were a lot of people announced. We'll get to that in a minute here.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just had that exciting news and poor Carrie got left off. But let's just jump into it. We've got a couple things that we're going to cover in news, and then we'll get into our main show and pick up right where we left off last week. So episode 9 casting, all of that's been done. We had the big press release that's kind of shocked me because it was like Friday, right? Last week, just out of nowhere, they announced it. And then we got some new people in there as well. So who all's joining that we didn't know of before?
So we had Naomi. Oh, geez, man. You made me forget the name. Naomi Aki, Richard E. Grant. And then a late addition you just alluded to was Kerry Russell, who wasn't on the initial press release. But then, what was it, like an hour or two later? They
said, oops. Sorry.
Well, I think the deal was just getting signed late because there were some late reports that it was still getting done or had just been agreed to verbally.
I see.
And then they revised it. At least that's what I've been able to cobble together here. But yeah, so those are the newbies coming into it. Naomi Aki's a relatively young actress. Richard E. Grant's got tons of experience. Of course, everyone knows who Kerry Russell is. So
yeah, and we've got a lot of people in Discord that are pretty excited about Kerry Russell joining. I've seen a lot of stuff about Richard Grant possibly being Thrawn. I don't know if you saw that. I've seen somebody put him in Blueface already as well. Do you see that with him?
I have not seen that.
And then we've got we got Mark Hamill coming back too.
Yeah, Mark Hamill, Anthony Daniels, Billy D, of course, has been confirmed now for Lando.
Officially.
Yeah, officially. And then, of course, the really exciting news that everyone, I think, collectively was happy to hear was how they were going to handle the character of Leia, and that Carrie Fisher will reprise her role using scenes that were filmed for Episode 7, Force Awakens, but cut from the film. And so they will not use CGI. She will not be recast, anything like that. So they will actually reuse some of those scenes. So that's a kind of a big question mark of what did they film
right
that wasn't in the movie. We know we had some scenes from the trailer, right? The handing of the lightsaber looks like that's Leia's hand in one of the very early
with
cuts.
Maz.
Yeah. So those are ones that there are scenes there, but it's a lot of questions around like even just costuming and you know how that fits together and is the narrative going to work? So clearly JJ thinks he's got an idea of how that's going to work and that it's going to be great and it's going to be fine. But I think collectively everyone was happy that she's going to get the due that she's deserved in episode 9. She's not going to be killed off screen or in the crawl or anything that feels less than satisfactory.
Mm-hmm.
And I think JJ had a lot of reverence for that. And Mark Hamill had a tweet later on, a lot of reverence that, you know, we're going to get, you know, what we hope for. And it's not going to be something that we're going to be disappointed with.
I mean, honestly, hearing that they were going to use footage from, you know, Force Awakens, that just blew my mind. And I don't know if they're going to use footage that they shot as it is, or do they go back and take that footage and then do some super high tech special effect that was created just for this, where they, you know, take her body and put it in, they're able to manipulate it. I mean, I'm not saying that's even viable or it's going to happen, but it makes you wonder, you know, when they make that statement when it first came out. I mean, at least for my mind, it just went 1,000 different places in 1,000 different ways about how they were going to do it. And then I started thinking, so what did they film? Like, was this stuff that was supposed to be 4/7? Was it stuff that would possibly be used in part 8? Just a million questions going on.
And how much actually is there, right?
Yeah.
So if it's just a 3 or 4 scenes, or did they really have a lot of material that was on the cutting room floor? But I mean, it's a good question though of, is any manipulation going to happen? Because in order to fit the topic and the discussion and the narrative and the story, that's difficult to do, when you're a whole movie removed from those original scenes and completely different ideas of how the story was going to go. They didn't know how the story was going to go by that point. So how's that actually fit in? But I think they made a very careful wording of how they did all that, to where I would be surprised if we had any of these unexpected, twists on the scene or the character, or, but maybe you're right. Maybe we do get some meshing of words and sentences where you don't actually see her saying it, so that it helps phrase it a little bit different way.
Yeah.
So, you have those options as well. And we've seen some of that with the whispers that we got in Force Awakens. You have some creative ways of doing some of these depending on how they want the character to show up.
Right.
And, it could be that she's in a hologram too, and you can cheat a little bit with some things there.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, I guess one of my fears, and I hope this doesn't come to fruition, but I just don't want them to, I don't want to be able to see that the reason why those scenes are in there is, they've written the story now and they've gone a different way with the story just so they could use that footage, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I mean, if they can pull that off without me noticing it, I think it'd be fine. But knowing what I know and knowing who I am and knowing most people, I think that's one thing that's just a reality. I think some people may be looking at that and really just look into whether or not they went that direction with it just for the purpose of, reshooting that or using that footage that had already been shot. I think that would take away from it for me. But again, I'm open to anything and everything as long as it's a good story at the very end.
Right.
I think that was kind of it in terms. I don't remember if there was anything else that came out from that. But the other thing, I guess, we'll roll on to the next topic here. Star Wars Resistance. We have one of the publicists on Twitter just, I guess, kind of doing a confirmation. I know that when Resistance was first announced, there was a lot of speculation about the art style. I think based on the little picture that was leaked, we got a sense of what that would possibly look like, and there were still some debates going back and forth about that. I think we've now got official confirmation that this is going to be a very anime-inspired type of cartoon, and that we'd be getting more details very soon about that.
Right, and they did confirm it's going to be CG animated.
Yeah. So
it's not going to be 2D or... I think we had used the word cell shading, kind of the old school way of doing it. Because you're right, the banner that we got for Resistance, had that very saturated and bright, but also a bit flat of an image, which gave some folks some pause. But the little projector that we had a semi good look at certainly suggested that these were computer generated and more of a 3D type of model to it. And it's more the style, which makes a lot of sense where the studio is at these days. I don't see them taking a vastly different direction. And now that you've got Clone Wars kind of overlapping on top of this production-wise, I could see that they would leverage what Clone Wars has done before this and what Rebels has done and keep progressing that rather than take a completely different kind of architecture side or style, if you will.
Now, we've talked about this on the show before. At least I know maybe Mike and myself have done this, but I don't know if we've ever gotten your take on our anime. Are you into anime? Do you follow it very closely at all?
I think we talked about it on a CAD once.
Maybe that's what it was.
Really early on.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't really have a lot of exposure to it. I grew up in Central Texas, and you kind of got the mainstream stuff, or at least I got the mainstream comic books and that type of medium, but I never really got anime. And it wasn't until my late 20s, early 30s that I was exposed to really any of it. And
that was 30 years ago.
About a decade ago or so. But it was something that was very unique to me, or very unique for me to see. And I enjoyed it, but I don't know that I ever really got into it. But I was exposed to it in kind of limited ways through some of the cartoons that were out, like, even like the Voltrons of the world and things like that. So it's not like I was completely oblivious to it, but I wasn't saturated in it. And I definitely didn't get the purer side of it that I think most people would attribute to kind of pure anime.
Yeah. I threw the question out there only because I know I've got some friends, and myself probably included in here, where I'm not the biggest fan of the style. And that may sound blasphemous for some of our listeners, but I mean, I don't mind it. Excuse me. I can watch it. I can get into it and doesn't pull away from it. I think we talked about the TIE Fighter animation, the cartoon that was done out there.
Absolutely.
Forget his name, right? That's kind of done that same style. And that I really got into because it was so detailed and there was so much, the frame rate was amazing. Where I start to kind of be a little disinterested is when it's done on television and it's not a really high production value. And I can tell it's not, it's got the anime style. Those are the stuff, for whatever reason, it just never clicked with me growing up. And I do like a lot of the old 70s and early 80s animation stuff, which I won't get into now. But is that, because I can be here for a while, but the stuff that I guess that you see today, or I guess the follow-up question really is, are you into that style of animation?
I don't actively seek it out, but here's the thing that Star Wars in particular can do is, and this is where the word inspired is very appropriate. They're going to take a style that maybe isn't as, I'm going to use the word mainstream. I know anime is exceptionally popular, but it's not as prevalent in cartoons of what you would turn on Disney, or you turn on of what we grew up with on Saturday mornings, or any of these other, Nickelodeon, things like that. So to be able to use Star Wars in order to highlight a different style, I think is really interesting and really cool, because you can expose this to people. And you know what? Early on, it's probably going to be a little, I don't want to say jarring, but it's going to be different to get used to it. But we've also had this adjustment with Clone Wars. We had this adjustment with Rebels, where we had these different takes on it, where it just took a little bit for us to get used to it. But as soon as we got into the story, the art style just became synonymous with that show, and it just fit. And so I'm excited to see what they can do with it, and see if this still feels like Star Wars, so to speak.
Right.
And to where we don't do it, but we're exposed to something that's, we're not usually exposed to. And it starts to grow on us, so we start to like it, but it's not, the pendulum didn't swing all the way over into full blown anime to where maybe it turns people off because it's very jarring from what they're used to seeing, but it swung it just a little bit to where it exposes them to it. And we've got some, something interesting and different to look at, instead of having the same artwork and the same CG effects and everything over and over. While we love it, I like a little variety too. And I think this is a cool way of introducing a little variety.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, for me, it's going to boil down to Filoni, the story, the characters, right? All the core stuff, and the animation is, whether it's good or bad, I don't know that it'll play too much of a role. I don't think I've ever, if there's something's really good, got a really good story and good characters and all of that, I don't think I've ever turned it off. You know what? This art style is not my thing. I've always been, plugged into it, as most people probably are. So,
and this is still going to be one of those shows where it's going to take us a few episodes to feel our way through it.
Yeah, for sure.
Rebels wasn't a smash hit right away, right?
Yeah.
And Clone Wars certainly wasn't with the movie, but it got really good, very quickly. So we just have to be a little patient with it.
Well, let's get into the main show, and we'll jump right into our part 2 of Asajj Ventress. We'll kind of start with just a real quick recap, and by recap, I just pick up where we left off. We had just gotten to the point where she was part of the Ahsoka Tano, I guess, implications that were there, and she had a big hand in exonerating her by giving up Offie's name as being the person that Tano had been speaking to, and she gave that up to Anakin, and they obviously let her go. Tano ends up leaving the Jedi Order, and we don't really hear anything really at that point about what they did for Asajj, whether she went back to the council or they went back to her. I mean, no one offered her an apology for anything, right? She was implicated throughout all of this as an assistant to the bombings and, all of that, but nothing ever came of it that I recall anyways. So I guess when we pick up, she's been now in this life of a bounty hunter, and she's been kind of self-focused, right? She's not really doing anything with anyone else. She's living her life over on 1313 and living with the scum and villainy of Coruscant. So, is that a fair assessment at this point? Do you think there's anything else that's going on here, or do you think there was, or did I miss something? Was there ever any kind of contact with the Jedi Order? Did anybody come back and just say, hey, sorry about what happened there, kind of thing?
No, not that I recall, which is kind of par for the course for that relationship between her and even the quote unquote friendlier ones of the Jedi, specifically Obi-Wan. So there doesn't seem to be anything there. They just kind of let her be. They focus back on Ahsoka. But you're right. Yeah, she's in the underworld now of 1313, drinking and picking up bounties as they come, and kind of adapting this new lifestyle and trying to, again, she doesn't have a true focus yet. And so we're trying to see exactly, which path is she going to take? Is she just going to sulk, or is she going to go start looking for work? She's not a person that's going to sit idle. She just can't do that. And she's got too much drive. She's not going to just, waste her life away.
Yeah.
But she's still definitely figuring out what this path actually looks like and which direction she wants to go.
And do you think she's content with this lifestyle? Do you think she's happy, or do you think that she's sitting there longing for something more in life at this point?
I think she's a bit lost, I guess is maybe the word I'd come to it. I think she's turned herself away now from relationships and from partnerships and from family with everything that's happened with the Night Sisters, and she doesn't have anything to really call her own except basically what's on her person and I guess a ship. And so I don't think she's happy. I think she's trying to make herself content, but happy is probably not a word I would use with Asajj Ventress very often anyway.
Yeah.
I think the only time we've ever seen her really happy is when she was doing some of her crewless activities. So it's but we're starting to see her get away from some of that too, right? So it's not she's not that same person either. But again, I just see her more as lost, because now she knows she's not that same person, but she doesn't know what she is, and she doesn't know what she is supposed to become or what she wants to become.
Yeah, I mean, to say that she's happy is probably far-fetched, only because if you think about it, and I mean, the last time she was even happy, if you want to just use that word, I mean, it had to have been back when she was still a Padawan, right?
Yeah, when she was Jedi apprentice.
And a lot has happened. I mean, a lot of time has passed. A lot of things have happened. And to say that, I mean, there's almost I would almost go so far as to say that she probably does not want to be, quote, happy, because the last time she was happy was probably then, right? But then the only other time that you can make an argument for that was when she came back into the sisterhood. And it seems like every time she gets to the point where she feels like safe and she feels happy, something rips into her life and pulls it all away from her. At some point, and this is just common humanality. I don't know how you would phrase this, but at some point when that happens to someone over and over again, you kind of almost get this like nihilistic view of things. Like, why does it even matter? Why do I even want to be happy when something's just going to go wrong and things are going to be, pulled out from me? It's better to stay content, maybe, like you said earlier. If she's content, at least for now, idle is probably, it's safe, and she doesn't have to worry about her life getting wrecked in a lot of different ways. So yeah, It's this very karmic type of view, right? You do all these nasty, bad things for a while that you can't help but expect that you're going to pay for those at some point. I mean, a lot of people believe in karma, and this is kind of it. Although, what did she do to deserve this in the first place? I mean, she seems like she led a pretty good childhood for the most part, with a lot of guidance. But yeah, some of this just seems like now she's atoning for the sins of what she accomplished under Dooku's tutelage. So we'll pick up, before we get actually into Dark Disciple, I do want to touch on a particular short story that was written by Christine Golden. It was the Kindred Spirits. So this appeared in Star Wars Insider 159. And we can get into a little bit of the story, because I think there's some things here that are, run parallel to the Dark Disciple story. There's maybe a little bit of foreshadowing, some patterns, some themes that are repeating, or even early on in this little 20-page short story that she wrote. But there are a couple things that we're kind of introduced to officially or formally, like the Banshee. So this is her she's got her own spacecraft, Starcraft now, that she's flying around in. And then we also get that she picked up this yellow lightsaber, right? So she's running around at this point with a yellow lightsaber, and she's doing that. I think she picked it up like on the black market or something. And when I first read that, I was like, okay, sure, black. Oh, well, wait a minute, this is Clone Wars, so yeah, probably, right? There's probably a million of these things sitting out there on the black market, not like during the time of the original trilogy. So those two things, and both of those kind of play a role, obviously, throughout Dark Disciple coming up. But one of the things that was very interesting is when they make mention of the fact that she's now wielding this yellow lightsaber, is that she has this sense of satisfaction that she's no longer attached to the two lightsabers that Dooku had given her. Right? It's almost those things were perverse to her, and she's almost glad. Well, she's glad to be free of those. It's maybe that last part of her that was still Dooku, right? And now she's gotten rid of it. It's all this kind of thing where she's really trying to set up her own life, and this is just two of the things that she has now. She's got her own ship, she's got her own lightsaber, and she's wielding those. So the story itself focuses around a bounty that she has, and it goes awry. She becomes, and I'm really going to condense this again, it's only 20 pages. We're going to condense this down to about 5 sentences, but she's on a bounty, and things didn't go well, and she's actually rescued by Lhasa, and we were talking about this before on the air. I don't know if it's Raimi. I don't have the audiobook, so I always read it as Raimi. That's probably not right, but Lhasa Raimi, who's the leader of the Bloodbone Order, so it's a band of pirates, and they live this very orderly and lawful kind of way of life, given that they're pirates, right? If you can be that as a pirate.
Lawful pirating.
Yeah, lawful pirating. It is. It's almost like this utopian type of group, right, where everybody kind of votes in who the leader is going to be, and everybody gets an equal share. That's all for one for all kind of mentality, right? It's very, again, utopian in terms of what you would think a pirate kind of band or group of folks would be. But anyway, she's
very it's very orderly at the very least.
Very orderly. And it's kind of cool. This is actually appealing to her in the short story. You get the sense that she's attracted to that. And there's an opportunity later on, we'll get to, where she's offered a role or offered a position in this little band of merry men, so to speak. So, but there's she's rescued. They kind of clean her up and get her back on her feet, and then they basically tell her, "Hey, we want you to be a part of a mission." So they're going down to take a ship, and there's some cargo and all that. But the gist of that is that they kind of entrusted her to be a part of this crew and to kind of fulfill the bounty that they're going after, one of the missions that they're on, right? So the whole plan itself involves going down and killing a bunch of Weequays, which we know that she's got a distaste for because of what happened with Weequays killing not only her was it slave father,
her master, but also her Jedi master, her teacher as well. So right.
See, in that, well, let me just kind of pause there. I guess in terms of her relationship with that group and what was being expected of her, did you anything there that we noticed? Any other trends that either we've talked about or anything that we've seen that or we're going to see coming up later on in the story?
Well, I think it's this willingness to adopt someone else's way of thinking, which is very different for Asajj, because we've seen sprinklings of it throughout at the very end of the Clone Wars with Ahsoka and as well as with Boba's crew. But this, she really gets kind of hooked in like all the way. I mean, so the Weequays are she hates these things.
Yeah.
She hates this species more than anything else, maybe aside from Count Dooku, right? Because they ripped everything away from her, not once, but twice. And for her to take an order from Lhasa Raim and say, no killing at all. Like, we don't kill unless it's an absolute last resort. And she wounds them pretty badly, but, and she softens, she said that she doesn't have any love lost for them in a very kind way, but she respects it. And she's not the front runner on this. She's not leading point, but she respects their wishes. And that's a really interesting change for her that we see happening. Now we're seeing it happen more frequently. Yeah. And we're getting this trend developing of where not only will she let someone else take the lead, but she'll adopt she'll adopt new ways of thinking and doing things, because clearly, and I think some of that stems from clearly the old ways haven't really worked out very well for her.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
right?
she's had a number of setbacks.
Right. And we start to see this wanting to disassociate with that old life and with the different ways that she did that, and the way that she used the dark side, or the way that she adopted Sith mentalities. And we start to see her wanting to pull away from that just a little bit. And so it's it's a continuing trend of her, just wanting to be something different and to try it out. And quite honestly, it's kind of working for her really well.
Yeah. And I mean, I did definitely get a sense almost immediately, and there's not a whole lot of content or context there in terms of why. You can probably draw your own conclusions if you follow, obviously, her career and her storyline, or you listen to the last episode. There's a number of things that have kind of happened that have led up to this point, but you can't imagine, the Asajj Ventress of just a few years ago being able to trust somebody like this and take an order of no killing weak ways. It's just, it's a very, you would say it's uncharacteristic of her, but given what we know now in terms of, again, the setbacks and the hardships that she went through, and just the level of maturity that she's kind of going on in terms of her overall hero journey, I guess. This probably does fit in with where she's at right now. And we talked about it a little bit in that sense of belonging, wanting to be a part of something. And she's turned that down a number of times. And here it is. I mean, she's got the perfect opportunity at the very end. So they get through the whole mission. They're back on the ship now. I forget the name of it. Lassa's ship. And they basically give her an offer. It's an open invitation to come back, to be a part of the team. She turns it down, and she says, well, if you ever want to come back, let us know, and, you can help out with whatever. And this comes back later on in chapter 8 of Dark Disciple. There's a little, they don't really speak about it. It just kind of happens, and then they cut back to, okay, here's how it happened kind of thing. But there is there's a moment there where Asajj and Quinlan go on a mission for Lassa. And it's a very pivotal moment because it's there. And I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but that's when a lot of things change for her. So again, this whole group and this opportunity is changing her yet again later on in the novel, even though she may not necessarily realize it. So,
well, this was one of the first times we also saw her really outwardly respect someone. We got a little glimpse into the amount of respect that she had for Lassa.
Yeah. Even
just knowing they're in a very short period of time, and the ability for them to play off one another and trust what they were doing. There was a scene in there where, Asajj is in cuffs and binders, and it acts like she's, turning code on her too. But they play along, and she sees it for for what she's trying to do, and it works out. So this synergy between them was natural already, but we see a lot of respect quickly earned too. And I think that's something foreign to Ventress that we haven't really seen before either. She'll respect someone like Kenobi, but for her just to respect, especially a non-Force user, it seems very different for her.
I mean, outside of Kai Narek, I couldn't think of anyone really that she respected. I mean, later on, there's obviously more opportunity there, but definitely not when she was, the Sith assassin, and even probably a Night Sister. I mean, she probably respected those, her sisters as well. But yeah, I mean, Quinlan Vos is the only other one that would kind of gain this kind of respect that quickly, I think. And even then, that took forever, right? That wasn't something that just immediately happened. So yeah, so anyways, we definitely get a couple different things that are happening just in the short story that kind of play out a little bit later in the Dark Disciple novel. So, and I think with that, we'll get into that book. So just to kind of set the tone, or I guess set the stage here. So Dark Disciple, for those of you who don't know, released in 2015, it was part of that Clone Wars Legacy multimedia project. So really what they did is they took a total of, I think it was like 8 episodes that were scripted out and never...
Katie Lucas had written all these shows, basically.
Yeah, and never produced. And so they didn't want that material to go away, and that's what gave us this Dark Disciple novel. And then so what happens is early on in the novel, she's on another bounty. And we can get into we'll get into a little bit of it, but basically the Jedi Order has this amazing idea that the only really way to stop this is to kind of hit it at the heart being Count Dooku. And by hitting Count Dooku, I mean assassinating Count Dooku. So, we'll get into this in another episode, in the next episode here, right? But so they enlist Quinlan Vos, who's kind of like this, I don't know if you want to call him a renegade Jedi, but he's definitely on these dark ops kind of missions and that sort of thing. And they basically say, look, we need you to do this. And it's here that he, I think someone recommends, I think if it's not mistaken, Kenobi says, hey, you know what? Here's something, go find Asajj Ventress, because she used to be his his apprentice, and she knows him better than anyone else. And if you can get him with good,
come close twice already.
yeah,
So.
with almost killing him, right? So if you can get in with her, then you're in good, and that'll kind of help the whole plan. So that's kind of how it all starts off. And the way they meet is just this, I don't know, it's a comedy of errors, but she's on a bounty. He kind of jumps in, and she's stricken, like completely taken aback by the fact that there's this guy that constantly is interfering with this person that she's trying to capture. And there's a number of things there are a number of instances there where, he's rescuing her at one point, and they've got this I forget his name now. Should have wrote that down, but the person that they're going after, they were trying to capture him a few times, and he got away. They captured again, got away, and the whole time he's trying not to give up the fact that he's a Jedi. And so she's really kind of put in this awkward position where she's got this idiot, as she refers to him, that's constantly meddling in the fact that in her bounty that she's trying to collect. And mind you, she's still in this mindset of, I don't need anyone. I don't particularly need this idiot here that's constantly screwing up this bounty that I'm trying to collect on, right? But what did you think about that relationship, the way it started? Do you think this, because I mean, to cut ahead just like one more chapter, she basically takes him in, even though all of this, I don't say bad stuff, but all these misfortunes happen as they're finally trying to capture this person. But do you feel like that was odd that she took him in that way, or is this just par for course given what we've already spoken about and where she is in her life? Yeah,
when I was listening to the audiobook again, I'd read the original book a couple years ago, but did the audiobook, and I had to think long and hard about that because it was kind of difficult to get there. But what I landed on was she appreciated his resourcefulness, I think, part of it. And also he was relentless, and he did have clever ideas and some things like that I think she started to say, okay, and again, she's already in this different frame of mind that she's not completely against the idea of partners. She's against partnering up with idiots, but she's still okay with the idea of partnering, as long as they bring something to the table that maybe she can't bring, or they bring more of that can help her out to accomplish that mission. And so she does a lot to push him away. And of course, some of his banter is, I think, slowly, it grinded on her early on, but then she, I don't know if I wouldn't say liked it, but was able to tolerate it and didn't think too much, I guess, of it. But so I just thought more as like, he brings something unique. He's resourceful. He's got some, I think she was aware of some of his quickness and some of his decision making and some of those types of items that I think she appreciated.
She was definitely reluctant at first, and I know there's a part of me that thinks that maybe, given the fact that you had somebody like Lhasa who had taken her in, cleaned her up, put her, entrusted her from the beginning, and gave her that mission, you could maybe make an argument that this was an opportunity where she was kind of paying it forward, or just repeating that same behavior. Like maybe that was an influence for her to say, you know what? Yes, he's an idiot. Yes, I shouldn't take him in because it kind of goes against, my code of conduct, so to speak. Maybe this is an opportunity for her to kind of return the favor to someone else. There's,
I've got another question for you though. But do you really think that she expected that to last very long?
The relationship?
Yeah, I mean, even as a student under her, I mean, I kind of got the impression she probably didn't think that was gonna. He wasn't going to stick around for all that long. No,
I don't think so. Once love started getting in there, right? I think that's when things got really complicated for her. Because I really think it was all business. As good as any Jedi, Sith, bounty hunter are, no matter who you are, if you're a single person, you have limitations, some natural limitations on what you're able to do. If she really felt like this person was competent, or at least could be competent, and she could take him in, help him, train him, do whatever she needed to do to get him to the point where she needed him to do maybe more elaborate missions, or missions that she just had to turn down because she didn't have the resources and she didn't want to go out and hire, bounty hunters like Boba Fett's, motley crew. She may have just seen this as a short-term kind of goal or short-term gig. And as things progressed and as her relationship developed, that's when I think things got a little bit hairy, and it was becoming clear to her that she was probably not going to be able to separate herself as much as she probably wanted to, honestly, because you got hints in there as that relationship developed that she was still trying to pull away. She just couldn't.
We saw the trust going, but I think the other thing was they had a lot of success. So it sounded like they were raking in the money. They were collecting bounties. I mean, they rehashed missions. They really formed a very competent, well-oiled machine of a team between the two of them. And then they recapped after missions of what went well, what didn't go so well, and traded ideas. And then they got better the next time. And then I think they had the perfect mission where they basically accomplished it in record time, collected the credits, and they were good to go. And so presumably they were doing very, very well for themselves over the course of, how long do you think this was? Was this a matter of weeks or months, or it kind of felt like months to me?
Yeah, I think he was meeting with Obi-Wan like once a month, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember there was
difficult to really ascertain. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there was at least 2 or 3 of those meetings that happened before he just cut off the meetings, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But
Right.
so I would say it was probably over the course of about 3 or 4 months. Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to say. I don't think they give you the time content there to kind of make that call. But I think at one time, I guess as time went on, there definitely was a sense of trust and respect and affection that developed between the two. But there is an interesting aspect of that relationship that we've not talked about. So he kind of goes undercover as a Jedi, and at some point, he reveals to her that, hey, guess what? I'm a Jedi, and she's already known. And she says, I knew you were a Jedi, and she calls out a couple of examples where he demonstrated extraordinary abilities that no human could have done.
His quickness,
right?
And the rescuing the children in particular.
Yeah, and so you got to wonder. So the question I think that we were trying to answer here really was, what was her objective, and why did she entertain bringing Quinlan Vos in as a partner? But I think maybe the more interesting question, and you can feel free to take a stab at this, but I think the more interesting question is, even if she knew he was a Jedi at some point, why did she continue to allow it? Was that love? Or was there something perverse in the fact that she had somebody like this? Or did she maybe just see him as someone who maybe had been a Jedi and left the order, much like she left her order? And so this was the kind of a blending or colliding of two kind of lost souls kind of thing. I don't know. Any thoughts there?
Well, I don't know that she actually ever saw it plainly, because I think when he saved the children, some of that was masked from her view, but she just was able to deduce it. Like no one could have survived that fall.
Sure.
Without some sort of force ability. And so I don't know if she brought it all the way to a Jedi, but I think she was like, okay, definitely force sensitive. But then when he said Jedi, then it probably snapped into place that what was a little less clear about whether or not she thought he was master level. But yeah, I think they had started working so well together that when he proposed the plan and he laid it out, I think some of it was just the honesty that he laid it out there and said, here's what it is. Because she didn't really like that idea either, right? She didn't want to go after Dooku initially. Done that twice. She has done nothing but suffered for those transgressions. But when he put it out there, and then that this was the Jedi's idea, I think she had this moment of like, what is going wrong with this world where this is, the Jedi are coming to me to help assassinate. But I think some of this, the history that they had built up, it wasn't a straight out betrayal or lie, because I think she may have felt that way a little bit, but I think she also kind of appreciated that this is how these things work.
Yeah.
So I think some of her history helps soften that blow just a little bit. But at the same time, you're right. There was a relationship starting there too, and a connection, and she didn't know quite how to phrase it quite yet. Yeah. And I think it was scaring her, but she didn't push it away or sever it either. She let him convince her to take up this quest.
And it's a good segue, because I actually have, about this, at this time, we're probably around like chapter 8, and it's a very pivotal chapter, in my opinion. But there's one particular passage that I'm going to break up into 2 sentences. This is in your show notes, so don't freak out here. There's one particular passage that's broken up into 2 different sentences. Earlier, we were talking about whether or not she was happy. And the way this reads, it says, Vos was quite possibly the least serious person she had ever met, except when he needed to be. He made her laugh, and she couldn't remember laughing since her time with Kai Narek. Do you feel, based on that alone, and we got this there's other examples, right? We're kind of boiling a lot of this down, but there are other examples there. But do we feel like at this point maybe she is starting to become happy, like the actual word happy, and not just content and just not, business like? It's more than just a profession. It's more than just a job with him.
I think she's enjoying herself at the very least. I mean, these gigs are fun because they're successful. They're making money. That great level of trust. So I think she's enjoying herself, and I think this is probably the closest she's been to happy, and probably since Kynar. I mean, I don't know that I would call her happy with the Night Sisters. It was more of a welcoming place and maybe feeling like a potential home, but she didn't have the opportunity to really segue into adopting that lifestyle and feeling as part of it. But so I think you're probably right. I think this is something that she's actually borderline happy about, and it's working, right? It's working, and she doesn't want to just like, this is working, let's just keep going with it. Just keep going with the flow.
And you kind of hit the nail on the head, because of the second sentence in that paragraph says, there was an ease in Voss's company she had never found with anyone before, not even with the Night Sisters, and she realized that she liked it. It wouldn't last forever. None of her relationships did. So in those two sentences, you get the sense that she's happy, and she's excited, or maybe about the prospects and how things are going. It's very different. And then the second sentence just kind of slams you right back down, or at least slams her back down, and saying she's looking at this as though this is not going to last, right? It's going to be just like it did with the Night Sisters. It's going to be just like it did with Kynar. Something's going to come in. The other shoe's going to drop here any minute now. And it's almost kind of sad, though, because again, we talked about this early on, I think in the last episode, where there's just this constant ebb and flow with her not willing to give herself over to anyone else or trust in anyone else, and being kind of the solitary figure. So,
well, and she's never let this relationship get physical either, right? Because she did value the business side of this arrangement, and she hints that other times there's a physical aspect to get the job done, or even just short-term pleasures, and then you move on. And she's never allowed that to creep into this relationship at all.
Yeah, and this is the chapter, by the way. So where we get the whole what is it, the wink and the nod? Oh yeah, yeah. So which I always thought was just kind of like the bend and snap. I don't know if anybody's seen that movie, but anyways. So let's talk about we talked about the Pikes family, the Pike Syndicate family. So there's a couple things that happened here. Do you want to just take this one and kind of set the stage on what was going? We can talk about maybe some of the things that came up as a result of this particular mission.
Right. I think they were hired to rescue their family, right? The mother and children of the Pike Syndicate.
Mark Krim, I think was his name.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so Ventress was very standoffish about this mission. She really did not want to do this mission, I don't think. And it got messy really quick. And to kind of skip to the nuts and bolts of it, or the interesting parts of it though, where she recognized how easy Vos was with children. And that made her exceptionally uncomfortable. Yep. Because she's just slinging the kid around, basically hang on or you're done, type of thing. But he's interacting with them. He's smiling. She can see that
he's trying to keep him at ease, right? Not let him freak out during this mission.
And she's like, I will never offer that to this guy, or she could never be that person. And she's starting to see, and she's starting to project that with Vos. I think that was the impression I started to get, was that, she's seeing that she could never fill that role for him. And so she's starting to transition this thing already in her mind. She's already letting those thoughts continue to creep in and start to grow already at this point.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of examples. I took this down as a note, and I don't know if there's significance here, to be honest, or not. But there are several examples primarily in the Dark Disciple novel, but even you can go back to like the Clone Wars, where children are involved in some way, and they all seem to have the same kind of impact on her. Like they scare the crap out of her. And that's not uncommon. I know people that,
as they should,
right? Yeah. Trust me, they do. But there are people that, that I know and that are always, never having kids. I'm not going to do it. They scare me. I don't, whatever. And I get that. That's completely respect anyone and everyone's opinion. But for her character, this is like frightening, kind of to the point that you made earlier. But we had the train, there was the train heist back when, I forget the name of the episode in Clone Wars, right? Where the little girl that was a
Right.
pivotal moment. Like, it just seems like in that moment, that child got to her heart, and she, did the right thing to free her, even though she collected money and yes and all that. That was a kind of a mask. I think deep down inside at that point, her only objective was, freeing that girl, right? So she didn't go to that creepy guy. And then there's the earlier on, we didn't talk about this, but on that very first mission, where she's introduced to Quinlan Vos, they're on Pantora, and there's a scene in there where she's kind of watching this family. This quote, she calls them a happy family, and it's like the mom and the dad and the kid. Dad's throwing the kid on the shoulders, kind of thing, and she's just kind of like gross, like this is disgusting. She doesn't want anything to do with that. In fact, I think she makes a comment about like, enjoy it while it lasts, because it's not going to be very long, and
Right.
Things are going to go wrong. We've got this one here, where she's completely out of her comfort zone. He's starting to get those feelings of this is not the life for me, and at this point we know they're they're not necessarily romantically involved, but I think they both know, and this is going back to chapter 8, that scene where they were that we just talked about, that they finally, you got the sense in their, it's told in two different perspectives, both Vos's and Asajj's, but something happened there. I think they both realized that they were
It's starting to
attracted
get
each other.
personal.
Yeah. Yeah, and that bond is starting to go. And this is where things start to get really, really kind of, again, hairy for them. So we had asked, you'd asked about, I guess, whether or not there was, the future transitions and how that would look going forward from this. I don't know. They have very infectious personalities. And this is, again, we're starting to see them kind of bleed and blend into one another. They're starting to get at this point, very emotionally, spiritually, and even behaviorally involved and attached. And I think that's going to play a big role later on, because she's almost starting to, Quinlan Vos is just like this, really great personality, full of life, half full kind of guy. And that's starting to wear on her, and not in a bad way. I mean, I guess it probably wasn't the best term, but she's starting to kind of pick up some of those traits. And we see these a little bit later. And at the same time, you can make the argument that Quinlan Vos is taking some of her traits, right? The harder parts of her. And that's going to play a role later on too in his transition as well. But you definitely get the sense that these guys are kind of coming together in a lot of different ways that neither one of them expected, and probably neither one of them, well, they didn't want it initially, but it almost feels like they're kind of pushing back on it as well. But at the same time, they're allowing it to happen, and at the same time. So if that makes any sense, did you get that sense at this point?
Yeah, I think so, and it kind of leads into our next topic here of when Vos comes clean and says who he is and what his mission is. She lays it out. This is what it's going to take to beat Dooku. He has to embrace the dark side, and he has to be willing to do things in order to he has to be able to kill in cold blood. He has to let go of some of as much as we've talked about her letting go of the Sith ways, he has to let go of the Jedi ways. And so one of the questions I had for you was, if he would have rejected that way of thinking, or if he would have rejected her part of that proposal of her willingness to accept under those conditions, what would that have done? Would that have just broken the relationship up altogether right there, or what would have happened right there?
Yeah, I guess I personally don't feel like it would have broken the relationship up. I think eventually
but his mission kind of would have been over then if she would have said no.
Well, that's true. I think I don't know. I'm one of these people that feel like this stuff was going to happen one way or the other. And we've kind of talked about this in other episodes as well, but we haven't even talked about the Force in any of this, right? And whether or not this was just the will of the Force, or if this was, their own doing, that kind of thing. But I guess I got the sense that this was bound to happen, that these two were on a course to collide and kind of change a lot of things, right, for the right reasons, specifically the Jedi Council. There's a lot of things that we'll talk about here, and just at the very end of this about redemption and all of that. But really, this to me, I always kind of read this as this was the Force intervene once again, course correcting for the bad ways of the Jedi Order and how they were starting to fall from grace. So I think eventually this all would have happened. I won't try to venture a guess in terms of how it got there or how it would have course corrected had he said, no, I'm not going to accept that. But I guess I just believe in my heart that at some point that would have still happened in some way or form. So we're at the part now, I guess, where we are going to talk about the lie of Master Thome. So as we all know, I guess, or maybe we don't, Quinlan Vos's master was Jedi Master Thome. And for the longest time up until this part in the novel, he had always believed that he died on the battlefield, and it's Asajj Ventress basically says, yeah, it was Count Dooku. He killed your Jedi Master. And she did that for a reason. One, it wasn't really him. It was her. Asajj Ventress is the one that actually killed him. And she couldn't tell him that. She couldn't bring herself to tell him that was the truth. But she also used that as a mechanism to kind of get him to kind of cross that line, to get to the point where he could kill him in cold blood, and use that rage and the emotion and the attachment that he had for his Jedi Master to kind of help fuel him and kind of get him to that next proverbial level that she felt like he needed to be in order to face Count Dooku and ultimately take him down. This was a huge moment because in the novel, as you're reading it, that she's lying, and later on it becomes even more significant because of, the way Count Dooku kind of turned this whole thing around.
Right.
But I think the question you had was out here was whether or not she made the right decision in lying to him. I don't know if it was the right decision. I think I would have, given what I know about her, even in this moment, I don't think for her in her wildest dreams did she think that this would ever come back to haunt her. As the novel went on and we got more insight into her character and what she was thinking, that was dreadfully going to happen, right? She was struggling with it throughout constantly. It was just weighing on her conscience the whole time that I've got to tell this guy, because again, at this point, it was probably an easier task, easier to sell. And as she became even more emotionally involved, more physically involved, spiritually, all of that, it really started to weigh on her conscience. And I think it was one of those things where she felt like, okay, I need to get it out. She was probably going to get it out, and she never did. And then unfortunately, it backfires her in a horrible way.
Yeah, she fell back into her corner a bit. I mean, you're right. She originally used it for fueling the hatred of Dooku, because she knew that was the only way that he was going to be able to accomplish this task and be able to do it when the moment presented itself. But you're right. She really struggled with this for, throughout the book, and not being able to tell him really started to eat at her. And again, a further transition where she has this guilt of, she wants to do the right thing because that she recognizes that's the only way for this relationship to, it's just like our relationships, right? If you don't tell the truth and you don't have that trust, there's really nothing there. But at the same time, she couldn't distract from it. And she always figured she had time. I've still got time to do this. We'll finish the mission. He'll understand. It's going to be hard. She recognized that, but she felt certain that she could bring him back to her at the end of the day. But she never could have foreseen. Well, she should have. I mean, you should always plan for these types of things, of him getting captured,
right? And
then using his ability, Vos's ability of psychometry against him. And we'll talk a little bit about that next week. But no, she didn't make the right decision. But again, if she would have made a different decision, would he have come along with that? Would he been able to do some of those things? I still think he could have, because he could have just started hating her, but she would have had to sacrifice the relationship in order to meet that end. And so was that something she was willing to sacrifice to go after Dooku? And I think at that stage of it, and I think as we saw for the rest of the book, those were parts that she wasn't willing to sacrifice for Dooku. She'd sacrificed enough.
Yeah, I don't think she was putting her neck on the line. At least she didn't think she was going to, but she wasn't going to consciously do that, right?
We still see this manipulation where she thinks she can win. She could take any situation and bend it to her will, and she'll find a way to win. And unfortunately, there's a history where that just hasn't worked out for her as well. So,
yep. And so kind of fast forward a little bit. So, Vos ends up turning to Dooku once he finds out that it was Asajj Ventress who had killed his master. And so he kind of goes to the dark side. She escapes. And from this point on, there's a couple of instances where, she's alone. She's thinking about him. She feels like she needs to go rescue him. She gets kind of desperate and enlists the help of Boba Fett and those guys to go try to rescue him again. And at this point, you get the sense that she's definitely in love. I don't know that it ever says that in the book, and I don't think she never uses those words. But
I think Vos was basically the only one they even hinted strongly at. She just kept, there was something that she suppressed. She didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
She'll deal with it later.
Yeah. But she goes so far as to basically enlist Boba Fett for, like, it starts off at 100,000 credits, and then she ends up just saying the final deal was 250,000 credits, which was basically her whole savings, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, if that doesn't scream that somebody's definitely in love and wants to,
personal. Yep.
Yeah, it's personal at that point. All of everything that she had built up, all of her bounty, all of her successes, everything that she had built up into that point, she was willing to just kind of give it all away for him. And it says a lot about her relationship with him at this point. And there's a question about whether or not that was reciprocated. We can talk about that in the next episode, but definitely I think it was mutual. I think he was kind of in that same boat with her at this point. They were just too tied together. And that doesn't go very well, right? That whole plan backfires, and she gets away from Count Dooku, Quinlan Vos, and basically reserves her opinion of him at this point that he is gone, that he is completely gone to the dark side, and she struggles with that. She doesn't know, how to feel about it. She's definitely, I think she suppresses whatever she tries to anyway, suppress whatever feeling she has with about him at that point.
And she has no one else but herself to blame for it either. She brings up the sleeper on multiple occasions that she pressed him into doing it. She forced him to kill the sleeper in cold blood, and that signaled the change. That was the fulcrum point for him to start on this path. And as soon as he was into Dooku's clutches, she absolutely lost him and desperate enough to go to the Jedi for help.
And then we get to, so they go to the Jedi and they come up with this grand plan again, that they are going to allow, I think it's, who is it? Anakin Skywalker, Ben Kenobi, or Obi-Wan, sorry. Obi-Wan and Asajj Ventress. So, she basically gets these orders. She's part of that group now, and they're on a rescue mission to go get Quinlan Vos. So the mission becomes a success. They rescue him. She is not convinced that this guy is anything but evil at this point, even though Anakin feels like Anakin's kind of naive in this, a little bit more naive than he normally is, but he's kind of like, hey, no, he seems fine to me. And Kenobi is kind of convinced that he's fine too. Maybe not 100%, but he doesn't sense the dark side in him. And so, they're both saying, he's good. We got to get him out of here. They rescue him. And she is adamant that there is something wrong, that he's turned, that he's pulling the wool over their eyes, that he's still part of
repulsed. Yeah, she was repulsed by it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And they get into this predicament where I think there's they're trying to escape in one of the Starcrafts there, and the doors are down or the shield's down or whatever, and they can't. And so Quinlan Vos leaves, and she's convinced that, okay, yep, he's leaving, like I told you. And Anakin and Kenobi are kind of given the benefit of the doubt. He ends up lowering the shields. They get away, and for those two, that was proof that he was fine. And for her, she didn't back down. She's still convinced. Nope, this is all part of the plan, all part of the game that he's trying to play here. There's some time that passes from that point on, and I think it's then that eventually Quinlan Vos comes back to her. They meet back at the bar on 1313, like back where they used to kind of hang out and throw drinks and all that. And it's not immediate, but over there's time that passes, and he's talking to her, and he's really putting on his and putting the best effort and best foot forward to say, you're wrong. I know I did all that. It was all a ruse. I was trying to play both sides. I was trying to play him, and trust me, it's me. It's really me. That kind of thing. He persists, like you said earlier. He's persistent, and she eventually gives in. And I think you have it in her is blinded by love, and that's really what it could have been at that point. Because I don't think in her mind, there's a part of me that even feels like she was still convinced that he was still dark, and she still allowed him to come back into her life because she loved him.
Well, but she also knew like how difficult it was to come back from that path. And
yeah,
it just
that's a good
doesn't,
point. Yeah, she'd been through it.
It just doesn't happen overnight, or it doesn't happen without help, or some. You have to have a reason to want to pull yourself out of that. And she used her own experiences to say that hasn't happened for him. And so, but yeah, she was struggling because she absolutely saw the darkness when they met back up, when they did the rescue mission. But now she's struggling because she doesn't see it. And we learn later on why that's the case. But I thought this aspect of, the love in the relationship, that like, okay, you really are you really are back. I must have been wrong. And she doubts, she has doubts both ways. Right. But then she starts wanting to trust. And again, we see this change in her of like, she is willing to trust him even after she gave her own self, or he gave her a reason not to trust her at all. And the only reason why that would be is because she's, so deeply in love with him, and they've got this promised lifestyle. He's going to leave the Jedi. They're going to be able to make this work. And for him to willing to make that sacrifice for her, she has to be willing to take that leap of faith. And she's willing to do that for him, even though there's still this voice in the back of her head saying there's something not right here. It's just that voice is getting a little quieter.
Yeah, and he basically convinces her that, hey, the mission's back on. We need to take him out.
And their infinite wisdom.
Yeah, and so they approach Jedi, and the Jedi's like, hey, you know what? This is an awesome idea. It worked so well the first time. Let's do it again. So they allow Quinlan Vos, Asajj Ventress, to go again undercover, or I guess go back and try to take out Count Dooku.
Well, with Obi-Wan and Anakin kind of in the behind the scenes a little bit, but
behind the scenes, following them, making sure that keeping both of those guys in order, and we'll kind of just fast forward so we can get back to more of Asajj Ventress, because really a lot of this is focused around Quinlan Vos and what he's kind of going through at this point, having just come from the dark side. But so yeah, we fast forward, and there's a moment in there where both Quinlan Vos and Asajj Ventress are with Count Dooku, and there's many moments in here where she has an opportunity to kill him. Like, this is it. They finally got to him. There's an opportunity here to kill him. And every time she's about to, or every time she questions why they haven't done it, Quinlan Vos keeps stepping in and saying, no, don't worry. We got to let him live. We got to help him. At one point, I think he didn't give him his lightsaber back. And it just speaks again to this blind love, because there was moments when I'm sitting there arguing with the book, like, why are you allowing him to do this? And there's moments too where she challenges him and says, why are we not killing him? This is wrong. It doesn't feel right. And he just keeps saying, no, don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. Just give me some more time. He never gives her the details, but she allows him to constantly keep doing this. And you come to find out what he's really trying to do here is he's trying to get Count Dooku to make contact with Palpatine, get all of them over to both where Palpatine and Dooku are together, and he wants to kill both of them, right? He's got grander plans of, if I eliminate not just Count Dooku and I eliminate Palpatine, Asajj Ventress and I can be together, and we have nothing to fear at that point, right? We'll have ruled the universe, so to speak.
Yep.
He's so...
Seen this before, haven't we?
Yeah, right. Like, this never works out, man. I don't know. Yeah. And it happens in some of the old legend stuff too, but this doesn't work out. And it just, again, it speaks to the blind love that she has for him. And then again, just fast forward a little bit more, what ends up happening is, like, Anakin and Obi-Wan, I think they kind of crash land on, was it I forget the name of the planet now. Yeah, Christophsis, right? So they're back on this planet, and Dooku, Ventress, and Vos all kind of go into this crystal structure, and the ARC troopers come in and they basically blow the structure up. And when that happens, Ventress is suddenly hurt, like almost mortally wounded. I think they kind of talk about
Dooku
it
as well. Right?
Yeah, Dooku's even worse now, right? Because he's already been, he's about to die, that kind of thing. And there's more moments here where at one point she's like right next to him, and she could easily just take his head off. She doesn't do it because Quinlan Vos is telling her, "Nope, need you to stay, need you to keep him alive. Just trust me on this," kind of thing. And it's in that moment, at one point, and I'm really jumping ahead here, but at one point, Count Dooku is, going to try to kill Quinlan Vos. And there's this moment in there where suddenly everything becomes clear to her, right? She kind of has this vision of what's, and this is how I interpret it, and you may have a different interpretation, but she almost gets this vision of clarity where she suddenly sees the light. And and the way I read it was she suddenly could see the outcome of what was going to happen, that Dooku was using Force lightning to kill Quinlan Vos. And by her stepping in front of that, sacrificing, not only would she save Quinlan Vos, who she was in love with, but that she would also save the Jedi Order from the path that they were starting to go down, in terms of, the assassination attempts now twice. And some of the stuff that we saw with Ahsoka Tano and even in the later stages of the Clone Wars altogether. So I've kind of said a whole lot there, and I know I was kind of jumping around or kind of jumping ahead in chunks, but I guess in that moment, was that your interpretation too? Do we feel like at this point that this is what happened with her, and that she was given a choice, or given the choice between good versus evil, light versus dark?
Yeah, and I mean, in leading up to this, we had great interactions with her and Vos, of where she's like, "Look, I don't need to kill Dooku anymore. I don't need this, and I don't need this to continue to loom over me. This revenge and this need to satiate, whatever this drive is. She just doesn't need it anymore. She just needs him." And then so in this moment when she has these, I viewed it more as she has these paths that were all laid out in front of her about, here are your choices you can make. And that was the light side of the Force, using my finger quotes, but that was the light side saying, welcoming her into that of saying, this is what it means. Because I think she had a moment of clarity there too, that this is what the Jedi experience with the power of foresight. And you lay these paths out, and then you have the choice to make about what you want to do. And one of those paths was, like you said, clearly to jump in front and to sacrifice herself, not only for him, but potentially for the bigger picture as well, because fighting this darkness with darkness isn't going to resolve this problem at all. And of course, we know that Dooku wasn't really the linchpin of the whole thing anyway, but it was, and I'm curious if she knew that as well. Well, I mean, she did know that, because she's been quote unquote an assassin, but yeah, she had these choices to make, or the choices were in front of her, and she didn't hesitate. And I mean, the only thing I could say is that was her reward, if you will, for finally letting go of really everything, not just the Sith ways, but even just the dark side ways and that dark way of thinking. And this was the reward of you have an opportunity to save the one that you love.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful message, of that self-sacrifice and willingly making that I think, so many people would do, given the opportunity for someone that they care about that deeply.
Yeah. And going back to, I guess and I'm glad you brought that moment up, because I forgot, I completely overlooked it, but the moment when, he was trying to convince her, I mean, she challenged him. She says, what kind of life would we live, Quinlan? Right? The kind where we're slaves to our hatred, our rage. She's basically arguing, saying that, the dark side is never enough. You constantly want more. You're never going to be happy. And this is where she actually says the word happy in that moment. And in that moment where she was given that choice, it's a really cool passage, that that the Force was kind of revealing to her that outcome, right then and there, and that she made a decision. It says that she made a decision. And so I guess the question is whether or not you felt like in that moment, do you feel like she went to the light side? Because
that's a tough one.
And I've seen the argument a couple different ways, or I've seen it on both sides, I guess. And I don't know that any one argument is stronger than the other. My personal opinion is I think she did. I think she really did cross over to the light side.
I think her letting go of the Sith and the dark side and the sacrifice of oneself. I don't know that she maybe welcomed it, but I think her eyes were open to it. Maybe is how I'd put it, where she finally was not thinking inward, and the only thing that she was thinking of was outward. Her only intent was just to save Vos in any way possible. And in order to do, and again, that was kind of her reward, if you will. But so I don't know that it was actually going to the light side. I think the light side just was finally, her eyes were open to it, and she could finally see it and remember it and really what it felt like. I mean, she even describes what it feels like, and she likes it, and it catches her off guard just a little bit too, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and we talked about, when we opened up with the first show, we talked about all these different adjectives for her. And one of the ones that I don't think we ever talked about was really just selfish. And there are so many moments in her career, her life, where she was absolutely selfish in a lot of different ways. Very few moments in there where she wasn't, most of them probably being later on in her life. But this is definitely a moment where she was selfless, right? Giving herself up the way she did. It's a very, very huge character arc for her and complete transition coming for, where she was originally. There is one particular passage, and I forget if this is in the opening. I think it's, if it's not, I don't remember if it's Lucas or Golden that said it, but there's a passage in that says, remember, you always have a choice to be better. I'm sorry, this is Quinlan. This is, what's her name? Sorry, this is Ventress's quote. She says, remember, you always have a choice to be better. You always have a choice to pick the right path, even if that choice comes a little late.
Right.
And that was when I think when I read that was part of me. That was really kind of what sold me on the fact that maybe she did cross over to the light side. And then the other passage that I was trying to remember was one from, I think it was, again, Golden or Lucas, but it said, at its core, Dark Disciple is a story of redemption, a story of how people can be unbelievably broken and yet find a way to rebuild despite the odds. All of us are given chances time and time again to transform our lives, and it is our responsibility to seize those opportunities before they disappear. So this speaks to what you were saying earlier too, where she just had these moments where an opportunity to do it, she just never did. And in this moment, she definitely did, and kind of gave herself up. I don't know.
This has been at the heart of Star Wars forever, though, with George Lucas. For him, it was always this power of choice, of good and evil, of light and dark, understanding that difference. Do you understand it? And then when the time comes to make that choice, you have the power to make that choice. Which path are you going to go down? Are you going to make the right choice? Or are you going to make the wrong choice?
Yeah. So I guess, does making the ultimate sacrifice in the name of light redeem her? Is she redeemed at this point?
This is always a loaded question because it's difficult to let go of all the things you've done.
Yeah. This is the whole Darth Vader thing, right? Or Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of examples of this, and Anakin Vader is the most obvious, and we'll see what Kylo Ren's story looks like. But that's always the difficult one of like, what is actually, redemption? Does one event really redeem you? And I think, if you want to look at it more spiritually, then the answer might be yes. Right. So if you truly turned a corner and you have done something so bold and big and or some event, and the ultimate sacrifice, of course, is definitely in play there. And it is probably one of the few things that people would actually consider relevant for that. Then, yeah, you did something, selfless in a way that is trying to make up for all the things you've done. Even though I think in and of itself, she's still, maybe there's a little selfishness here of wanting to save him in the galaxy and the Jedi or whatever else it was. But at the end of the day, I think, I probably do still go with the redemption angle because she's not looking at just that relationship. I think she's also looking at a bigger picture here as well. And it's not just her own desires that he live, but that he does good things too. And that he comes back from this and does good things as a result of this as well. And so she really has cast off this self-centered nature in its purest form. And I think aside from all the physical atrocities that she's done in the past, I think this is probably one of the more pure examples where I'm actually willing to say, yeah, I think this does redeem her in many facets.
Yeah. And there's a cool moment there at the very end. So she does pass. She dies. Quinlan Vos is completely in shambles and doesn't even know how much time has lapsed, but we know it's been several months, or at least it's, I think, a few months. And there's a moment in there where Kenobi is kind of in front of the Jedi Council, and he's basically making the argument for Asajj Ventress and her redemption. And he says, "You misunderstood Master Windu." I mean, he's challenging Master Windu by name right there. All of you, he says. She didn't just save his life; she saved Quinlan, and I believe she may have saved all of us. And so he's almost making the argument again that because she was, because of her act of selflessness, that she did save more than just Quinlan's life. She saved all of them. Again, because she put them on a different path that they were going down because of the assassination attempts and the thought that would be a good idea twice. I think
in execution too. I mean, a whole different thing coming into play too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Great decisions all over the place.
Yeah.
Yep.
He also says that she died a true friend of the Jedi.
Right.
And so I think in his mind, he always had a level of self-respect. I think he found her attractive. There was a couple comments in this book that he makes about her being attractive, that kind of thing. So I think he always had a soft side for her. But yeah, I in my mind, I would say that I feel like she was redeemed, given everything that was going on. It wasn't just, she saved one person's life. I think there was a lot more here that kind of makes up for it.
Well, and the Jedi, to their credit, give her full respects, right? And then they give her the same type of treatment that they would have for a fallen Jedi, which I think speaks volumes of the impact that her decision did make on the Jedi as a whole. And so it was very satisfying that they, made that right decision there and gave her that respect.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap up what happens with her, she's kept at the Jedi Temple. They take very good care of her. They kind of restore her body, I guess, from all the damage that had been done. And then they send Quinlan Vos and Kenobi more of an escort, or just to make sure, because he's come around. Yeah, he's more of a chaperone at this point. But they head out to Dathomir so that they can give her a proper burial. And it's an amazing chapter. It's chapter 42 of the book. Every part of that book is just, I could read it over and over again. It's just such a cool chapter.
The whole end of this book, man, I listen to the car, I just had tears streaming from my face.
Yeah, it's like,
it's really emotional.
It
really is. It was crazy.
So they get there in Dathomir, and, Kenobi they kind of comment about how beautiful this, horrible place is, that it's got a kind of this weird beauty to it kind of thing. And she's in a casket, and he takes her over to the black pool. I think we talked about that in the last episode where
this was the pool she was resurrected in. Yeah.
When she became part of the sisterhood again. He takes her back to the pool. He uses force to levitate her body out of the coffin, and then he lowers the body into the water. And it's at that moment that suddenly there's these green swirls. Oh, and I actually skipped over one of the parts that got to me. They've dressed her. He hadn't seen her up until this point, until the coffin was open. And they had dressed her in a black outfit, a black gown, and that was a gown that they wore. We skipped over this, but there's a moment in the book where that was kind of that first moment where they realized that they were in love, and so it kind of had this special moment in his heart. And no one, they just found her wardrobe and picked this one thing out because maybe it was the nicest thing that she had, but the significance of it was enough that for me, and probably for Quinlan Vos, when I read this, it was like, oh, that just kind of rips at your heart. Yeah. He lowers her into the pool, and then suddenly we get these green mists that we're all familiar with from the Clone Wars start to kind of swirl above the pool, and it all ends, at least her life, or maybe not her life, but the next part of her life ends with these whispers. And I think the last word that's whispered is sister, meaning that she's now been officially brought back home, back into the sisterhood, and can live in peace. Finally.
Well, and what was really cool about that scene too is they talked about the dark side and the energy, because it's just it's a part of that. It's part of Dathomir, and it's so steeped in it, right? But it was what was interesting is that Vos had to get Kenobi to kind of recognize it, of saying, do you feel that? And Kenobi's like, yeah, the dark side is just, it's crazy here, but it wasn't threatening. And that confused Obi-Wan of what it was. But Vos now had this different appreciation for it, this understanding of it, where it wasn't threatening because it was a part of her people, a part of the Night Sisters, but it was the welcoming home, the appreciation that they took the respect and they brought her back home in order to be in her rightful place. And so that was an interesting take on the dark side that we really haven't seen. This is really the whole aspect of the Night Sisters has really changed kind of the view of the dark side for me in general.
Yeah.
But this scene in particular really had a profound, mental impact on me of what the different ways that you can think about this aspect of the Force, where usually we just see it with evil and with suffering and pain and that type of thing. But here it was, they can actually coexist. And I started thinking about the sequel trilogy and some of the balanced discussions that we've had in various places. And this is one of these where they coexisted because they had a mutual respect in that moment in time. And it was Asajj Ventress that helped make that happen. But also the Jedi also had a part to play in that as well. And both sides were actually came together for a short period of time and coexist.
So that is the story of Asajj Ventress. Any final thoughts there, I guess, on her? If not, we can talk about kind of, just some final thoughts maybe on attachment in general.
I think in general, just a really quick summary, Asajj Ventress is a character that I, early on in the Clone Wars, really didn't feel like had a whole lot of arc to her. She was a ruthless assassin. She had victories, she had failures. It was more of the relationship with Dooku and where that was going, and then every once in a while the banter. But as her character matured and as the shows matured, and then into this book, it just floored me how attached I got to this character, and in particular this book and the story of just where they took her and how she evolved, and just these different, because you see this in everyday life too, of where people struggle with losing things, and they lose themselves, and they get into these different ways, and then someone saves them more or less, and then where do you go with that? And so I was really satisfied that we got a really complete arc. And this was at the end of this book. I remember when I read it initially, and after listening again, it was heartbreaking that we're not going to get any more stories with her, like beyond this, because it was like, no, we finally got to all the good stuff. This is where all the good stuff starts, right? So this is where we're supposed to start having fun with this character. But at the same time, those stories would be hollow, without this type of ending. So it's a sad satisfaction of sorts, but I never went into it thinking I was going to love Ventress like I have. And then the last, handful of years when we got some of these things, it really changed my perspective on her.
I would agree. I mean, this is a character that I think initially, was kind of cool. Female, wielding two, sabers, Sith, that kind of thing, right? A badass. That was all cool, but it still did feel very one-dimensional. I never in my wildest dreams thought that this character would go on the path that she did. And I would challenge anyone to really find a character that is this complex and has gone through so many different changes in her life, or their lives, I should say. There are very few. It's a very short list in terms of the complexity and, all the trials and tribulations that our Star Wars characters can go through. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the book is amazing. If you haven't read it, we've already spoiled everything, but it's one of definitely in my top 5. It's probably my top 3 in terms of Star Wars books. So
yeah, it really hats off Katie Lucas and Christy Golden. Just an amazing story.
Yeah, and I guess final thoughts on attachments. I mean, we see that it's kind of all over the place, really, with the Jedi, or we see it in other examples. And the most profound and impact obviously comes from Anakin and Padme, but we have other examples in there like Kenobi and Satine. There's Kanan and Hera. Luke and his friends, I guess you could make that argument at some point. Even in Legends, we had like Qui-Gon and, was it Tall, I think was her name?
Yeah.
Yeah, Luke and Mara Jade. I mean, it just goes on and on and on where they're,
You just had to slip that in there, didn't you?
that's for Mike. I mean, objectively, it sounds great on paper, right? That there's some code out there that doesn't, it says that you can have attachments. But the problem with that is that these are all people, these are all human beings or beings of some type that have emotions and feelings. And it doesn't seem like it seems very impractical for you ever to make an argument that you can't have attachments. It just doesn't seem like it's possible. And it almost seems like, at least with like Luke and some of the other examples, having the attachments and embracing them may be the best thing to do. Love conquers all, love wins, that kind of thing. That's the story that we got from the original trilogy. So, I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing. So, anything else we need to cover? I'm kind of running along on time, but
I kind of talk what we're going to do next week is we're going to tackle Quinlan Vos and the Jedi of Dark Disciples. So we're going to kind of stay in the novel here, and we'll get a little backstory on Vos, but really dig into kind of his journey, but then also the Jedi journey within this book and just where they're at as a whole.
Where their heads at.
Yeah.
Well, if you'd like to follow us, you can do so on Instagram at the Cantina Cast. You can follow us on Twitter at the Cantina Cast, Facebook /the Cantina Cast, fan mail, cantinacastfanmail at gmail.com. There, if you guys are enjoying what you're hearing, please leave us some positive reviews on iTunes. We've got a Discord available. I think it's about time we probably published that. I don't think we've done that in a while. Threw the link out there, but come join us here. We have a lot of good time. If you really like the show, you can support us on Patreon or maybe pick up some cool swag from the TeePublic site as well. Jonesy, I'll let you close it out. But
Yep. Appreciate everybody listening. Clone Wars Legacy, we are about to get neck deep in it. We kind of already are. So the next several episodes are going to be a lot of fun. So I hope you stick with us.
All right. And with that, we will end the show, and we will see you guys next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.